We are here, it is Black History Month, and the Big DM wants to talk to people about the history of our great city and our great state, people who have lived Black history, who can tell the story. And today we find ourselves in a very special place talking to a very special gentleman. He is civil rights leader and activist, James Felder. Mr. Felder, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Chris. I'm doing good, doing great.
Wonderful. Now, a lot of people may be tuning in for the first time on our website, and they may have never heard of you. So, Mr. Felder, tell people who are viewing right now a little bit about yourself and about your background.
Born in Sumter, South Carolina, educated in the public schools there, and then attended Clark Atlanta University. It was then Clark College in Atlanta, and then Howard University Law School. Served military tenure duty, spent time at Arlington Cemetery, headed the casket team that buried President Kennedy in 1963. Then a fellow named Vernon Jordan came to Washington, D.C. and literally dragged me back to Columbia to run the voter education project. And when I got here, one of the first persons I met was a lady named Jessica Simpkins, whose house we're in here today, where my office is located. And she's the mother of the civil rights struggle in South Carolina. Here was a lady who came from a family with means. She didn't have to do this, but she had a passion about voting rights and about education. And so she welcomed me to Columbia, and I have never regret a moment of it.
Let me ask you a question. Morgan Freeman recently said that he didn't think there was really a need for Black History Month. Most of the people I've talked to have disagreed with him. What's your feeling on that, Mr. Felder?
You know, I love Morgan Freeman, love his movies, his actorship and so forth, but I disagree with him totally on this issue.
I thought you might. I thought that you might.
First of all, much of our history has been lost. If we don't preserve it and write it, it sometimes gets lost, or either somebody else will write what they thought happened. So we have to preserve it and we have to share it with others. So the time to do that is a period during the year you set aside and focus on it and you capture the public's attention. Carter G. Woodson, father of what we call Black History Month, he started this project years ago when he said we need a time to talk about and focus on our history. At first it was just a one-day celebration, then it went to a week celebration, and then it went to a month celebration. People often say, why was February picked to celebrate Black history? It's the shortest month in the year.
Yeah, I've heard that. That was the reason why. Not really though, I guess.
But the real reason was he did it for 4 reasons. February is Lincoln's birthday month. February is Frederick Douglass' birthday month. February is also the month of Richard Allen, the founder of the AME Church. And also February is the month that the NAACP was founded. So that's why he selected February as a time to pause and review our history and teach it.
You are described as an activist yourself. Where does that passion, where does that fire come from?
It started in Atlanta. I was a student at Clark College, president of Student Government Association. This is 1960. When the sit-ins began, 4 students at A&T State University, February 1st, 1960, launched a sit-in at Woolworth Soda Fountain in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Yeah, I know this story well.
And it kicked off, it spread like wildfire, like wildfire across college campuses all across the South. When it got to Atlanta, we said we had to do something. You got all those Black institutions in Atlanta, Clark, Morehouse, Spelman, Morris Brown, ITC. Julian Bond, the late Julian Bond, I say, because he's deceased now, and myself and Lonnie King, a student at Morehouse, and Marion Wright Edelman, who was at Spelman at the time, she's a Bennettsville, South Carolina native. We sat down and decided to plan a sit-in movement in Atlanta. Dr. King had just moved back to Atlanta, so somebody said, let's see if we can get Dr. King to go with us on our first march. We met with him at his house. It lasted all afternoon, so long that we missed dinner back on campus, so his wife, Coretta, fixed sandwiches for us. Dr. King did go with us on that march, and it was March 15th, 1960. Thousands of us left the campuses of the Atlanta University Center and went downtown. Dr. King led a line to Rich's Department of Soap. Julian Bond and I led a line to the state capitol. When we got to the state capitol, they shut it down, and so we marched around, went back to campus. Dr. King and his group didn't have that liberty. They locked them up. And that was the beginning of the sit-in movement in Atlanta. Now, why did I get involved with it? First, I'm president of Student Government Association. You're the leader, you gotta get out there, right? Absolutely. Now, I'm at Clark College on a pre-med scholarship because I was going to med school as fast as I could get out of Clark and got caught up in the sit-ins. All of a sudden, I'm spending more time in jail and on the picket line than I'm spending in my chemistry lab. So my professor called me aside one day, Mr. Felder, says, I can't recommend you to med school, you missed too many of my labs. I said, okay, Dr. Spriggs, then I think I'm gonna go to law school because I had sat in the courtroom watching the lawyers and that's what got my passion going. But the Army drafted me, so I had to do that. And then after that, went to Howard Law School and then came home in '67 to run the Voter Education Project.
Not only are you an activist, but you're also a historian. And in my research, a woman's name I've heard several times, and I was wondering if you could kind of enlighten us about her story. Her name is Sarah Mae Fleming. What can you tell us about her?
Oh, I can tell you about Sarah Mae Fleming. 18-year-old domestic worker from Eastover, stayed in Columbia during the week and went home on the weekends. And one day she got on the bus, same bus she'd caught all the time, but it was full. There were some vacant seats up front, and at that time the buses were segregated. The whites sat up front and we sat in the back.
And this was in Columbia?
In Columbia.
In Columbia.
In Columbia.
Okay.
She refused to get up when what the driver told us to get up, you gotta go to the back of the bus. She refused.
Story sounds familiar.
Yes, yes. So she was trying to leave the bus, but she tried to go through the front door. He wouldn't let her go through the front door, punched her in the stomach. She doubled over, but she got off the bus. She came to a lady's house named Majeska Simpkins. This house.
This very house?
This very house.
Okay.
Told Miss Simpkins about it. Miss Simpkins hired a lawyer for her, paid her fee to sue South Carolina Electric and Gas Company, which operated the buses at that time. The suit went up to all the way up to the Court of Appeals and back to Columbia, and then Court of Appeals and back to Columbia. Finally, they ruled in her favor. And this was a year and a half before the Montgomery bus boycott. This was 1954.
So this was before
Rosa Parks.
Okay.
So she had won the right for blacks to sit on the front of the bus in South Carolina a year and a half before Rosa Parks. When the Parks case got to the Supreme Court, the court simply said, we've already dealt with this in South Carolina in the Fleming case. So Montgomery, Alabama, you've got to desegregate your buses. Sarah Mae Fleming never got the credit. Why? She was an 18-year-old. She'd gone through such a traumatic experience, she just wanted for it to go away. So she just kind of faded into history. On the other hand, Rosa Parks was a 40-year-old lady, secretary of Montgomery, Alabama, NAACP, very active in the community, and Martin Luther King was down there. So she got all of the notoriety and so forth. So finally, Sarah Mae Fleming's getting her due. There's a sign, street named for her now and so forth.
Yeah, they recently named a street here in Columbia, right downtown.
That's correct.
And a lot of people probably see it and don't know the story.
Don't know the connection.
Yeah.
She's buried at Goodwill Cemetery on Highway 378 going into Sumter. Just before you cross the river, there's a Baptist church on the right there. And that's where she's buried. And every time I pass there, because I go to Sumter 2 or 3 times a week, I salute her.
An amazing, amazing story. We have a new president. It's a new day, Mr. Felder. I don't necessarily want to get into politics too much, but I do want to ask, you've seen a lot over your years, and there's been a struggle for African Americans. It's a new day. Things are much better now. We have Barack Obama as president for 8 years. What do you think about the Trump presidency? Do you think that he will be able to push forward the African American agenda? Do you think he'll help? Do you think he'll hurt? What do you think about what's going on right now?
Right now, he's turning the country and the world upside down with his antics and his foolishness and his craziness. We've never had a president like that before. First of all, the man never held office. Doesn't understand how government works. Sure, he's a billionaire, knows how to make money, but does not know how to run a government that serves the people. So he says outlandish things, call people names, including federal judges. His appointees, the people he has surrounded him with, they are so afraid of him that they do not give him good advice. Now, how does it affect the African American community? We've been through worse than this before. We'll survive this. I'm worried about the majority community, the white community, how they're going to handle this, because Trump he's narcissistic and all of that. But we'll get through it. And the question is whether he will get through it.
That is the question.
That's the question, whether
For
he
sure.
will get, right. He may get impeached at the roads he's going down. You may see impeachment come up. You may see health issues come up and all that, you know.
The role of the activist is so very important, and I just want to thank you for everything that you have done. But maybe to a young person who's looking at this, why should they think about getting out there on the front lines and standing up for what's right, and not necessarily just going home and going to bed, but making a difference? Why should activism be on the template of young Americans right now?
First, they need to know from whence we come. They need to know the Sarah Fleming story. They need to know the J.A. Lane story of Briggs versus Elliott that became Brown versus the Board of Education. And much of that case, Briggs versus Elliott, was the first of the civil rights cases that joined Brown and the other cases in Washington and became Brown versus the Board of Education. That was started right here in this house. And some of the plaintiffs are on the walls over there with Jessica Simpson in the middle of it. Young people don't know that history. We've got maybe two generations, at least one generation, have no clue of what happened in the 60s and the 50s and the 40s. So that's another reason we need Black History Month, so that they can learn the history, we can force it on them, and then they would understand the reason to speak for those who don't have voices, to act for those who don't know how to register and vote and keep up with the issues. So there is a need. In my day, and Jim Clyburn's day, we were a part of the youth NAACP in Sumter. Both of us came up in the Montpelier Gay Church was the home of the Sumter Youth Council NAACP. That was the beginning of our politics. And if you get involved in an organization like that, it stays with you. And you'll find yourself fighting for rights for yourself and for others the rest of your life.
I got a chance to walk around this house that's been here for
almost 100 years.
Almost 100, and there's so much history in here. We are located at, what is this,
2025, yes.
Marion Street.
Yes.
And can people actually come and look around in here?
Tours come through. It's part of Historic Columbia Foundation, so call Historic Columbia, arrange for tours. I'm here most of the time. I have an office here. But to be sure that somebody's going to be here to lead the tours. But it is open to the public because your dollars support it.
Absolutely. And you know, you're an activist, you're an attorney, you're also an author. Tell me about the books you've written.
My first book was The Burial of John Kennedy. For years, I would get the question, how were you selected to head the casket team for John F. Kennedy in 1963, when Washington, D.C. was segregated even? And so after 25 years and getting all those questions all the time, I decided to tell the story by writing the book. And the book is I Buried John F. Kennedy. It's available online and so forth. That was my first book. The second book was Civil Rights in South Carolina. I came along at a time when Jessica Simpkins and Matthew Perry and all the other leaders were alive. And I sort of sat at their feet. So I've been recording interviews and stories for some 25 years, and so I finally decided to put all of that into the book, and it's called Civil Rights in South Carolina. What I did was to begin with 1939 and trace the history of the NAACP and all of those lawsuits that got us to where we are, right up to I cut it off at 2010 when Steve Benjamin got elected mayor, because the publisher said, if you don't do it now, we ain't gonna publish it. Okay. That was the second book. The third book was about the AME Church. I am an AME Church, I'm an AME member, grew up in the church. And so that book is about the making of an AME bishop. How do you become a bishop in AME Church, you know? So I outlined that. It's got great reviews. It came out last summer at the AME General Conference in Philadelphia. I'm working on a fourth book presently.
That was the question. What's coming up? I know you're not done, I can tell.
I think I got a couple of more in there. The one I'm working on now is The Lawyers of Clark College. When I came out of Clark College, there were 5 of us who went to law school. It was the largest group ever to go to law school from Clark College. So I'm writing about those guys, but guess who the first lawyer was from Clark Atlanta University? James Weldon Johnson, who wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing. In 1894, he became a lawyer, first black lawyer in Florida. So he lists that group, he's the head of the list of the group of lawyers out of Clark College. And almost all of us who came out of Clark went into public service, served in legislatures, county councils, and so forth. So I'm trying to have that one ready by commencement this year in May.
In May of this year.
May of this year.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully our viewers will get an opportunity to stop by this wonderful home. It's been here for 100 years, about 100 years or so. And they may even get the opportunity to meet you here. It was such a pleasure being here with you today. I want to thank you for your activism. Thank you for your service. And thank you for your time as well today. We really did appreciate it. And we learned a lot as well today.
You're welcome.
Now, if people wanted to get your books, how would they go about picking them up?
Amazon.
And the first book was?
The first book is I Buried John F.
I Buried John F. Kennedy.
The major bookstores.
Okay.
Or if you want to go online, you can save a few dollars and get it from Amazon. Or the History Press has all the books also.
And they could probably just Google your name as
well.
well.
It'll pop up.
Kind of find out all of the information. Mr. Felder, thank you for your time today. We really, really appreciate it. Black History Month is necessary.
It is.
We find out so many things every time we sit down and we speak with people such as yourself. It was a pleasure today, and we look forward to your next book coming out later this summer.
Later this summer, that's correct.
Wonderful. Thank you. It is the Big DM.
My pleasure.